Hello everyone. Let's go over physeal injuries. So what do we understand by the term physis or physeal injuries? So the physis basically is the region between the epiphysis and the metaphysis, and physis per se constitutes of the growth plate. Now, the growth plate is very important for the growth of long bones, especially in children. And any injury to this can lead to various side effects. It can be premature fusion of the epiphysis and metaphysis, and that can lead to arrest of growth in the long bone. So let's just undergo, let's just overview these layers of the growth plate first. So we'll start from top to bottom. So the top being the closest to the epiphysis and the bottom being the closest to the metaphysis. So you can see there are a total of 5 layers, and we can remember this by the mnemonic. um Real people have career options. So R is for resting zone, P is for proliferative zone, H is for hypertrophic zone, C is calcification, and O is zone of ossification. So we can understand the growth of these long bones by this diagram over here. And basically what you can see is that the multiplying zone, multiplying cells of the zone of mitosis is in the higher zones, that is closer to the epiphysis, the resting zone and the growth proliferation. These are the two zones which have active division of cells. Okay, and here is where your changes in chondrocytes and all will occur. These cells, after dividing a lot, will eventually go into the hypertrophic zone, and their matrix will get calcified, and eventually they'll come even closer to the metaphysis where there will be cell death. Okay, and this excessive calcification is eventually going to form your bone. Okay, and the repeated processes of cells being manufactured and being transferred eventually to the calcification zone will keep on adding newer and newer cells into the bone, and this will keep increasing the size of the bone longitudinally. All right. So now let's come to the very matter at hand, physeal injuries. Now, why are physeal injuries so important? Because 10% of all fractures in children are actually constituents of physeal injuries. And the age group that is particularly affected is either infants or children, especially male boys between the ages of 10 and 12. Okay, and the mechanism of injury is similar to ligamentous injuries that occur in adults. Any varus injury or valgus injury, any sort of angulation at a joint in an adult, because the metaphysis and epiphysis have fused, that becomes a very strong uh, region in the bone, and therefore that does not get damaged. Whereas in children, the ligaments are relatively strong, but the zone between the epiphysis and metaphysis is weak, and that is why that results in chipping off of the growth plate or chipping off of the physis, and that can lead to a physeal injury. Now let's come to the classification of physeal injuries. So there were two people who classified Physeal injuries, Salter and Harris, and thereby the name of the classification is Salter and Harris classification. They've classified it into 5 types. There's an additional sixth type that we can talk about. The first type you can see is the fracture line running through the growth plate, and especially the layers that it runs through is the hypertrophic and the calcific zone. So these zones will mostly contain of dead cells, and this will not hamper the growth of the long bone. All right. Then we can see this red line, the fractured line running through again the hypertrophic and the calcific zone, and also a triangular chip has been taken away from the metaphysis. This is class 2. Then we have class 3 injuries. Here we can see the entire thickness of the epiphysis has been fractured, and all the layers of the growth plate have been involved in this fracture. Now, this is a concerning injury because even the proliferative zone and the resting zone have been affected, and this injury is particularly going to affect the growth of the long bone. Then we come to the fourth type, which goes through and through the epiphyseal plate, goes through the growth plate, and also goes through the metaphysis, pulling out a larger triangular chip. Then we have a type 5 injury. A type 5 injury is a clinical injury that is radiologically occult. If a child was to come after sustaining this injury to the hospital, I would take an X-ray for this child, and I would not see any abnormality on the X-ray. The child would come back after 18 months, and I would see that the affected arm is shorter than the normal arm. and then I would make a diagnosis in retrospect saying that this was probably a type 5 Salter and Harris injury. So this type of an injury is particularly an injury that occurs due to compressive force on the growth plate. And because of this, there is compression of the growth plate and eventual destruction, but not visible on the X-ray. And then we have an additional sixth type, which basically involves the periosteum or the surface that covers the bone. And stripping off of this periosteum over here, that can lead to a type 6 injury, which is also a very bad injury. So that was the classification of Salter and Harris. Thank you.